Okay, a pleasant good afternoon to and a happy Sunday to all our Civic Vibes family who already tuned in to the program. I wish to apologize on behalf of Civic Vibes for our late start. We are a little 6 minutes past 6 o'clock. Actually, 11 minutes, my bad, 11 minutes past 6 o'clock. So I do want to apologize for our late start due to some technical difficulties that we were experiencing. But again, I want to say a welcome to all of you and a special welcome to anyone who is joining us on this program for the first time. Welcome to you. For today's program, we won't have Brother Lofty with us since he has some family commitment and will not be with us this afternoon. So wherever you are, Brother Lofty, I want to say a pleasant good afternoon to you. I know you're tuned in and listening. So I wish you a wonderful Sunday. It is a beautiful Sunday in the neck of my woods where I am hosting in Atlanta, the US. We have what? A 90 degree temperature. So that's kind of warm and nice. I'm enjoying it. I know our folks back home just went through a very stressful experience with the passage of Tropical Storm Brett. And I must say, thank God we were spared. However, we're not out of the woods as we have a very long way in the hurricane season. And I would say the word is always be prepared, remain safe, and be vigilant. I'll be hosting today's program, Civic Vibes program. And with me, I have my co-host, Anthony Drago. He's no stranger to Civic Vibes and someone who has candidly speak his mind on the many issues and conversations that we have on Civic Vibes program. And I will expect from our brother Drago today that same candid conversation. So let me just say a pleasant good afternoon to you, brother Drago. How are you doing today? Out of NYC, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. Good evening, Alvin. Good evening, Alvin, Mr. Thomas, Alvin. Good evening to the audience and the viewers. I want to say a very special good evening to those of you who listen to Civic Vibes every Sunday. And if you have any new listeners today, good evening to you. I know a few of the audience from my program that I have on a Wednesday night on TDN, This Week in Interview, which is at 8 p.m. every Wednesday night. I know some of my audience had indicated that they will be joining. So if you're there, a special welcome to you. And like you, Alvin, I want to, just give thanks and gratitude that Dominica seemed to have been spared from the worst of the storm that came by this week. And so it's a pleasure to be on as usual. And I want to say thank you for inviting me back.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, my brother, Anthony Drago. Let me just shout out to some of our folks who have already logged in, and I guess they've been waiting since 6. We have Fifth Sunshine there with us already. Addison Baptist, good afternoon. Our Mali Austria, one of the faithfuls, never miss. Bernard Allen, Dave Bertrand, of course, Jefferson, Winston, and who else do I see? They are coming in slowly but surely. They're all there. Let me say, though, that today we have a special guest as well with us, which I will introduce shortly. He, too, is no stranger to Civic Vibes program, quite articulate and where he would like to see our beautiful island, Dominica. And that person we have as our special guest today is no other than Mr. Peter Carbon, former Minister of Agriculture during the UWP administration. Good afternoon, my brother, Peter. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Mr. Thomas and Mr. Drago, and good afternoon to all fellow Dominicans and lovers of Dominicans, friends of Dominicans. I'm happy to be here today to just share the information and share some hope to our people. I think that spirit of fear that is passing through our country now need to be replaced by a spirit of hope. and possibilities.
Thank you, Brother Carbon. Thank you for that. Those kind introductory remarks. I see Petrocarbon has jumped in, and Youtheli Vital, I think that is, have jumped in. So quite a few folks. Today's program, in case you may not know or be aware of that, is program number 24. Yes, you hear me. Today marks our 24th program for the year. We're quickly moving into the second half of the year starting July 1st, and we've had 24 programs. And I must say, though, that you are the ones who make that program meaningful. You're the folks who logged in every Sunday, who follow the conversation, who join us in the conversation. I refer to it as a conversation. We're not here talking to anybody or talking down. We're having a conversation in terms of where we would like to see our beautiful country Dominica move to. So again, a pleasant afternoon. Veronica Pascal, just saw you jump on in. Unfortunately, though, today we'll not be able to take in the calls. However, you can post your comments and ask your questions in the chat. We're streaming, as you know, live on Facebook, YouTube, as some of our social media handles. Please share the live. Please share the live. Share the link. Tell a friend to tell a friend. And let's get the conversation as far as wide as possible. So I suggest friends, family, sit back, grab a drink, and let's have another stimulating, engaging conversation. Today's conversation, we're going to look at what the theme or the general overall theme is for today's conversation. And that is, your vote is your voice. Your vote is your power. Do not let anyone steal your vote. Let me repeat this again. Today's conversation, we're going to be looking in a sort of general terms in terms of what Brother Carbon is going to share with us and my co-host Drigo. Your vote is your voice. Your vote is your power. Do not let anyone steal your vote. That's the sort of broad theme around which we will be discussing. Also today, I want, in a way, and I'm sure our guests will speak to that, I'm sure quite eloquently. I want to speak and direct the conversation to that young man or young woman who was born in the 80s, and more precisely 1982 to be exact. And why I'm saying 1982? This young man or young woman would have been 18 years of age when the Dominica Labour Party came into office in 2000. So someone who was born in 1982, had they been registered to vote, meeting the necessary requirements and all what goes with it, would have been able to vote at the age of 18 in the 2000 election. Fast forward to 2023. The Labour Party has been in office for 23 years. Yes, 23 years. It's amazing how quickly that time can fly away. And this young man or young woman is now 41 years of age. 41 years of age. And the question therefore remains, or the question that needs to be asked is, how do you, that 41-year-old young man or young woman, see your vote? How do you see your role as a citizen? And what are your views on politics? Now, I know over the last couple of programs, we've been looking at the whole question of the electoral reform. And all of what I have just painted in this brief introductory remark speaks in general terms as well to the electoral reform discussion we've been having. I see Edith John, Glenda Burton, Cecilia King, Anthony Simon. These are some more folks who have the jump on. So having painted or given that framework, let me just invite our guest, Brother Carbon, Peter Carbon, to begin the conversation and to share with you his thoughts on how he see us moving forward in terms of, as I said, your vote, your role as a citizen, and how do you ensure that that vote of yours is not stolen away from you and your whole view on politics. The floor is open to you, Brother Carbon.
Yes, good evening to all Dominicans. I'll first say the vote is the only equalizer we have for people. Look at what your age is since you're 18 years and look at how old you get, your vote is equal. Look at how much money you have. I could be broke, you could have thousands of dollars, our vote value the same. And if we were to go and ask somebody in the 70s to buy their vote, that would be the worst insult you give that person. Look at how broke they were. They knew that the value of that vote and they knew it wasn't for sale. So people like us that experience the value of the vote will never put up our vote on auction. Let me say our political system is a democratic system where the people decide on the leaders. It's organized in a parliamentary system where each constituents or each group of villages, we call them constituency, determine who will represent them in the parliament. And that is all the source of power for the country. That individual in that constituency determine who is the prime minister, who is the president, who are the ministers, who are the advisors. Everybody come back to that one person. Because we operate a party system, party usually depend on the constituent to put forward their representative. Sometimes it requires a lot of discussion among the people. Sometimes it even requires voting among the people to determine who is going to represent that particular party in the parliament. Has that changed? I think it has. Now, this was the source of power, as I said, and the people within the constituency, within the villages, knew the background, the character, the commitment of that person. So when they select somebody from the grassroots there, that person is going up to the parliament with the responsibility to the people. That is where the system is structured. Have we seen changes in the last few years? I think we have. My own experience as a parliamentary representative, I had no interest in parliamentary politics. Like any other Dominicans, I enjoyed politics, I discussed it, but a group of people came to me and asked me to represent them. I had to make a hard decision with my family and everybody else. There was one other person who was interested in also running, and we had a discussion, and we were going to go to a runoff. But that person said, okay, I'll allow you to go, and I'll give you full support. That's the way I was selected. The leadership of the party had no idea that I would be selected as representative. So when I sit in that party, I don't sit for party leadership. I sit for the people who selected me to represent them. And I think we are missing that in Dominica today, and that have to be corrected. The second thing I would like to say before I pass on to you, that vote, those of us who grew up in the 60s and 70s knew the value of that vote because we saw the transformation of Dominica. When I grew up, my first involvement in politics was under E.O. Leblanc. And he transformed rural Dominica because there was a big dividing line between what we call bourgeois roseau, we used to call them in those days, and j'habitation. I hope everybody can understand the patois, but there were some people from rural areas compared to the people from the city. All the secondary schools was in the city, and maybe 5% of the school population came from the rural Dominica. It was very difficult for anybody to leave rural Dominica to go to town. Mr. Liebler came in, and the transformation he made was, one, he introduced and promoted the cultural culture as a form of giving people confidence. So people started getting confidence in themselves and in their country through culture. He extended the intake of people from rural areas into secondary school, people like me, because they had what they call hostel, where the school had a boarding school. It's like a boarding school we know today, where people from rural areas could live in the school while attending high school, secondary school. But most importantly, he focused on the farmers. He introduced what he called the buying depots, and they bought all the produce of the farmers. At the same time, he invested in feeder roads, land distribution, invested in projects for crop expansion. This transformed Dominica. And up to today, I think the Labour Party is benefiting from that transformation by just using the name of Labour Party, although they have not adopted any of his policies. So we that grew up in that time knew what a vote could do, how a vote could move our parents from going down and selling a bunch of plantain for pennies in the market to delivering their produce to a depot and maybe moving from $100 a week to $1,000 a week. They were able to buy vehicles, build new homes, educate their children, and all the rural Dominica start expanding. How did it benefit the city? Because the people in rural areas had money, they now can go down to the cities and do their shopping and do their in the cities. So business in Roseau expanded. And that is the foundation of success for Dominica. And this is the power of the vote. At that time, we had the upper class, we used to call them bourgeois, who had power. And people only got power when they had the big transformation of, I can't remember now, but I know Mr. Thomas remember, allowing people without property to vote.
Yep.
And as I witnessed Mr. Laville competing against Mr. Stevens. Mr. Stevens was a teacher, so a teacher and didn't have money. So Laville had 3 estates, so he had money. And he would bring the entire constituent to Cabana Beach before the election. And he would have music, he would have kill cattle, he would have alcohol, and everybody would go to that party. But in the end, 80 to 90% of the people voted for Stevens. That couldn't buy them. They didn't have the education, but they knew the power of the vote. And I would like our people to start focusing on that vote. What do I want that vote to do for me? What do I want that vote to do for our country? Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I will end there for now.
All right. Thanks for that. Introduction, Brother Carbon, Peter. I think you have put this in some sort of context. And I guess as the conversation develops and evolves, the question remains now, that message or that context within which you have just presented the conversation, how does that resonate with our young people in particular today? So let me now just maybe get Drygo in just make up some brief comments as well in light of what you have said so far and what his own thoughts process is as it relates to what we're looking at, your vote, your role as a citizen, and your views on politics in general. Mr. Drygo, jump in.
Yes, Alvin. I want to say, Peter, thank you for that. I learned from you today some history.
Yep.
And that brings it into the perspective of what we were talking about. Because I was born in 1967. So I was that young person that came and met a system in place that I did not know how it came about. I do not remember E.O. Leblanc as Premier of Dominica. I know of him because I hear people speak about him, and people always speak about him in a way that um, that in an admirable way, saying that he did so much good for Dominica and Dominica benefited from it. But you put it in that context of how much he contributed to making the foundation of Dominica. And so, Alvin, the reason I'm referencing that is because if we have to look at it in that way, that even though I wasn't aware of the nitty-gritty and the details, because it was a system that was working and functioning well for the benefit of the country, my ignorance of it did not adversely affect the development of the country. We have to put this in context now of where we have a government who's been in power since 2000. So that means that you have folks who are coming up to vote for the first time this year. So let's say somebody was 5 years old in 2000. Right now they're 28. So they have voted a couple of times, but they don't understand the trajectory. They don't understand the path over which we travel to get to where we are. And so all they know is what's currently operating. Mm-hmm. And so with that lack of information, what point of reference do they have on which to make decisions and to judge the performance of the government, the only government that they've known? They don't have a point of reference. And so that's why I think it's so important that today's theme be thought of in that way, right? That information that you gave and all the rest of it, and how we became independent, and explaining the way the politics is organized and what does politics mean. People have their own definition of politics, and sometimes you hear people say, I am not interested in politics, I don't know politics, all politicians are liars, blah, 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 blah. And people don't understand that what politics is a system that decides how the resources of the country is going to be divided and who's going to be benefiting from the use of those resources. And so if that information has to be gotten to the young people that we're speaking about. And if the powers that be, or the people with the responsibility to provide information to the young people, if it's not in their interest to provide that information, they're not going to do that. They're going to water down any subjects that's in high school that would educate the young people so that they can make better choices. It's similar to the US right now, where you have a push to diminish any kind of mention in schools about slavery and the history of Black people and all of that, because it's not in the interest of certain portion of the population for Black people to understand that. Not just Black people, for everybody to understand that kind of history. So vaguely they know that, okay, there was slavery and Black people were enslaved and blah, blah, but they don't know the details. So now when they hear a Black person talking about requiring reparations or special treatment, they're like, well, I'm working, my parents are working, why do you deserve special treatment? Without that historical context, they do not understand the disadvantage that an enslaved people have trying to compete or to function on an equal playing field. And so tonight, though, I want to say, if the government is not going to do it, and we don't expect them to do it because it's not in their interest, whose responsibility it is to make sure that that information gets to the young people? And what are the best modes and channels that we can communicate that to them? And so I am focusing on us, on our side, because this is what we have control of. When I say our side, I mean our side who are interested in restoring integrity in our voter system. And ensuring that when we have an election, the majority of Dominicans feel like it was free and fair. They may not be happy because their party did not win, but at least they feel that their party was given a fair chance of getting a success at the polls, and therefore they can look to the next poll to try again. So if that information is not being given by the government or the school system or all of that, then whose responsibility it is to make sure that that information gets out? It's not enough to wring our hands and say, why, them guys not fair, he this and that, and this is what they should be doing, and that's not what they should be doing. Okay, we recognize that. Where we are right now is what can we do about it? With our limited power, position, limited resources, what can we do that a young person who may out on a Sunday afternoon playing football or whatever it is and not listening to Civic Vibes, how do we make sure that that information is available to them so that when we come to them and say, well, electoral reform is something that is significant, they don't just dismiss it as just another talking point or people that are sour because they did not win the election and that sort of thing. So that would be my focus. I hope I get to talk about that tonight, is we can, while we're trying to influence the powers to do the correct thing, what can we do on our side to educate the population, especially the young population who don't have that frame of reference of what it should be like? How can we go about educating them so that they understand what we are trying to achieve, and they too can be motivated to help to make those demands? So that is what I would like to say in terms of my introductory remarks and in response to that brilliant opening that Peter gave us this evening.
We lost Mr. Thomas.
Maybe so we could probably continue until he comes back.
I will continue because
Uh-huh.
I think we have to help our people understand what is the role of government. What do we expect from government? Because development, we hear about third world countries and first world countries. It didn't happen automatically, or they were not blessed as being in first world, and we struggling at third world. Countries develop because of the human resource, the human factor. And the first thing government must do is to ensure that they maximize the benefits from their human population. If you want to be selective or play favoritism among your people, you already destroy your path to development. Because when Westerners pick a team, they try to pick the best bowler, the best batsman, best wicketkeeper. And the population might criticize them for leaving out somebody they believe that's best, but everybody's looking at the best. In government, you want your best people to come forward to work for the rest of us. So the first responsibility of a government is to organize structures, institutions, and to expose the human resource to create wealth, create opportunities for the rest of the people. And the way we divided our people politically, I think they have destroyed that most important objective. Because when you say labor right, you mean that you are special because you're part in power. When you get elected, you get elected for everybody. It's like 50 of us go to vote, 26 vote for somebody and 24 didn't vote. The 24 have to expect equal opportunities from that person that was voted. That's the way the system works. If the system didn't work like that, you'd have to divide the resources of the country to the other 24. So my experience and my operation as a parliamentary representative, I believe I will give more attention to the people who didn't vote for me than the people who voted for me. And I'll explain why. and I'm not going to try to bring down anybody, but people who voted for me, they voted today and they went about their business tomorrow. They didn't depend on me to do anything personal for them. Whereas the people who didn't vote for me are the one knocking at my door and always want favors. I think this has captured the attention of the present government, and they feel they must now give attention to people who want things from them and forget the ambitious, hardworking person who want to create things. They forget they're alive and well. Because these are the people who bring development, because they use their skill, they use their talent, they use their energy, they use their resources and go out and be creative. The people who sit down and want things, they don't create anything. So the entire country suffers. So one of the biggest mistakes we make, as I said, is dividing the country into
and identifying folks as labor rights and
yes,
rights or freedom rights or whatever. Peter, that is so important, because when you gave your introduction, you said that one of the things that Mr. Libner did was to develop culture and use culture as a vehicle for people to develop pride in country and pride in themselves. And so folks became proud to identifying themselves as Dominicans, first of all. Yeah. And so the reverse has happened, where you see people identify themselves as a laborite or a UWPite or a freedomite before they think of themselves as a Dominican. And that is a major shift. And that shift can only happen in a vacuum of information.
Yes.
And to tie it back to what you just mentioned, is that a politician gets elected to office. The resources that he's going to use for whatever he's doing is not his resources from his pocket. It is the resources of the country, which belongs to everybody in the country. And so it's not a matter of a choice. A politician should not have a choice. The system should be built in such a way that there's no other way but to understand that the resources are not yours. The resources are all of us own. And therefore, the system has to be in place for all of us to benefit. So a case in point, I see Alvin is back, but before I hand it back to him, a case in point, take for example, all of a sudden now Dominicans are receiving houses from the government. It's not the traditional housing scheme where you're given a property but it belongs to you. You are facilitated a loan and you have to pay back your loan, and then eventually you get your title. And as your family grows, you can go to the bank and take another loan and expand on your property. No, right now people are given keys to an apartment. Even in that case, where is there? And now we live in an age of information where everything is so facilitated. Where is there? Can I go online, for example, and go and fill out an application for housing? What are the rules that govern? What criteria does somebody have to meet so that they can qualify to get a house? Where is that? What is the structure? Because the money that is used to build the houses doesn't belong to any one particular party or any one particular person. And so therefore, if the government has a scheme where they're giving homes to people, policy, you and I and all of us should know what is the policy, what is the procedure, where do I apply to get onto the program? And if I am denied, I can be given the reason why I am denied. My income exceeds the income limit, my family size is too small, whatever. But at least you would see the reason why you are denied. And you can compare it to what the criteria that was published is, and you can understand why Alvin got a house and you did not get a house, right? In the absence of that type of system where there's transparency and fixed and open policy, what do we have? And so I'm saying that to bring it back to the theme, we have folks who are, I mean, you become aware of yourself and your surroundings maybe at 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10 years old, depending on how your education is. So there are folks who are 30 years old right now, and the only system they know is that type of a system where there's a hurricane and people pass on the back of pickups and they give this household a bag and they skip that household, or that one get a smaller bag and this one get 2 bags, and nobody understands how the resources of the country is managed and shared for the benefit of everybody and giving everybody equal opportunity to participate and to benefit from the use of the resources. I'm going to pause there and give it back to Alvin. But that is how I see we should be, the approach should be.
I want to come back and give a little addition to what is said.
Well, go ahead, Peter. Go ahead and do that, and then I'll come in after you.
Okay, as we know, he mentioned housing, but housing is part of the construction industry. That's a major part of your economic development, okay? It's a major pillar of your economic development. In the past, we had local contractors. These local contractors employed laborer, handymen, and the system was organized in a way that this local man that came in pushing a wheelbarrow, after a year or 2, he started laying blocks. After 5 years, he became his own contractor. We have many, many examples of that in Dominica. So if a government looking for long-term development and bringing economic development to its people, and they have $10, rather than giving one man to build apartments outside the participation of the people, he would take that $10, he put $1 in Castle Bruce, $1 in La Plaine, $1 here, get 3 contractors together, give each of them 5 houses or 4 houses. He would put a team together, and what you have, that money will circulate in the community, and at the same time, employ our young people and train them to become contractors. So by that, Dominica will move from having 10 contractors when they came in office to now we have 50 contractors. That is development. And rather than having $10, having a house given to somebody, you have maybe 20 houses given to distribute. And the people now, because they have something to hold on to, they want to work, they want to produce, because they have to repay part of that responsibility. And that's the way you get development. So when we see United States first world and we see us in the third world, we know why we are still in third world and we're not aspiring to be first world. To be in the first world, you have to have policies, you have to have people who implement policies, not by color of skin or color of hair or color of party, but because they are Dominicans and they meet the criteria that you yourself set up for development.
All right, so thanks for that. Thanks for that input, Peter. Well, first of all, let me apologize to my fans and listeners. We had a little freak weather here in Atlanta. Any one of you who is locked in from Atlanta, I'm sure you realize what's going on. But I'm back. And I wasn't fortunate to have heard all the comments made previously by Peter and Tony. But just to see on the question of the housing very quickly, before I move into making some other comments. The point remains, and I'm sure some of the folks on our chat, and Tony in a minute will go through the chat and just see what questions the folks have there, sure, and what comments they're making, because they're part of the conversation. We want to have them as part of that conversation. But just to say quickly, though, on the matter of housing, people make it sound like when we hear this present administration in housing, like that's a new thing. And we know, Peter, Tony, you're old enough to know. And I'm sure some of our many persons who are on, I see Medina Senhouse on, and she'll know that as well. Look at the housing scheme that we had in Baffin State. Look at how that housing scheme was developed and how persons, like you say, Tony, were able to apply and get a house in Bath Estate. No attachment whatsoever as to whether you're blue, red, or green. Then we had the housing schemes in Canefield. Then we had Simon Boulevard housing scheme, which the unions as well were involved. Zabuka, may his soul rest in peace. We just had a fallen hero, trade unionist Alvin Serra, actively involved in bringing about this housing scheme. So this is not a new thing. So to make you feel, well, this is a novel thing and we are providing housing, and look at how it's been done. That in itself is questionable. But the fundamental question in that conversation, Tony and Peter, you'll agree. We can talk today till the cows come home. How do we get that message into the minds and the hearts of those persons that we're trying to address? This 41-year-old, which 9 years from now, they'll be 50, almost getting closer to retirement. How do we get that message across to let them understand? As I started off earlier by saying, what is the value of your vote? What is your role as a citizen? And how do you view politics? Let me just, we are quickly coming on to our first hour of the program. It's amazing how time flies by. But let me, before we get into that next segment, let me just reference very quickly, because I'm a man of law. Government should be of laws rather than of men. That's a tenet in our JCI creed. Government should be of laws rather than of men. In other words, we can only govern a country based on laws, okay? It's not how you feel or whatever it is. The Constitution of Dominica under Section 33 speaks about election of representatives. And Section 33(2)(a), and for all of those who are listening, every Commonwealth citizen of the age of 18 years or upward who possesses such qualification relating to residence or domicile in Dominica as Parliament may prescribe shall, unless he is disqualified by Parliament from registration as a voter for the purpose of electing representatives, be entitled to be registered as such a voter in accordance with the provision of any law in that behalf, and no other persons may be so registered. So it talks about citizen, it talks about being registered, it talks about the right to vote. Right. It goes on further in Section 33(2)(b), and it says, every person who is registered as aforesaid in any constituency shall, unless he is disqualified by Parliament from voting in that constituency in any election of representatives, be entitled so to vote in accordance with the provision of any law in that behalf, and no other person may so vote. Now, why am I doing all of that? I'm doing that to show that that vote we're talking about is enshrined in the Constitution. It's right there. It's not something where a man decide, well, if I want it or if I give it to you. It is there. Now, what I did further, I sort of try to get a sort of understanding. And Peter spoke to it earlier on, the question of culture, values, and all of that. When we are citizens, what come to mind? Citizen, just from a very simple definition, and folks who are on the field could do that as well. But just a simple definition. A citizen is a participatory member of a political community. Full stop. Simple. Participatory member of a political community. And then when we talk about politics, simple definition again. Politics are the actions or activities concerned with achieving or using power in a country or society. Simple definition. Very simple. When we talk about your political beliefs. Your politics rather, are your beliefs about how a country ought to be governed.
Often, yep.
Simple. No hyphenated definition. So that tells you three simple definitions. One, it gives you the framework within the Constitution that you have that right. Two, it tells you what a citizens ought to be. And three, it tells you what politics in a very simple term should be as it relates, as it connects all three. And that is why sometimes when some young people say, man, I'm not in those people politics. You hear that all the time. Man, I'm not in politics. Man, I'm not into politics. I've given you a simple definition of what politics is. So I think what is required is for us, both young and old, to recognize our responsibility and to recognize that, even as I said earlier, within that context of the administrative reform, that we have a responsibility as citizens, we have rights as citizens, and both this responsibility and rights touches on the question of your vote, the power of your vote, not to allow anybody to steal your vote, and to exercise those rights as a citizen. So I just thought I wanted to just throw that out as we're getting into the conversation. So what we will do now, Tony and Brother Peter, we could just go through the chat and see what some of the comments that we're getting and engage some of our viewers that's on there with us. And then we will take a short break. We will introduce a song which I think has tremendous meaning. But before we get to that, Tony, let's just go through the feed. You want to go ahead and see what our viewers are saying?
Yes, Marshall Lawrence, he says, while opposing parties understand the need to come together, so too must a youth movement be established to help bring about change. Medina Senhouse says, yep, so true, Alvin. And we broke the original house and built a beautiful home in its place. Didn't have to beg no palret. Like in reference to the homes when you spoke about the housing scheme and folks being facilitated together.
Absolutely. Mrs. Senhouse lived in Baffert State. That's where she had her house. So that's why I called her in. Go ahead.
Right. Miley Austri. Boy, I'm tired of Skerrit. He's a wicked man. I ran away on the labor when United Workers' Party was in government. Money used to flow every weekend. People going to shop in St. Lucia and Guadeloupe, people going on excursions. So right there, Alvin is addressing what we're saying, that folks, this is his opinion, okay? But again, we want people to, when they form an opinion, that they have an opinion that's based on their experience, they have an opinion that's based on information, but more importantly, they have the opportunity to exercise a vote that is informed by that opinion that they have, that is based on the knowledge that they obtain. So that's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
That folks understand.
Absolutely.
That if I don't like what is existing, I can go on election day and give somebody else a chance to, I shouldn't say it like that, but change the management then to see if you get an outcome that is different from what you're currently experiencing.
Absolutely.
And if that doesn't change, next election you change them out again.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that captures what we are talking about today.
Yeah. And let me just say, in terms of Mali, who says, I think Mali said something to the effect about the young people, a young people movement or something to that effect. And he's right.
Yeah, Marshall Lawrence.
Marshall Lawrence. Yes, absolutely. He's right on that. You need to have that. The question of excursion, Peter will remember, and maybe you could remember too, Tony. I remember the Dominica Civil Service Association and several other groups used to organize excursions every summer. People were able to work, earn their money, and go on a vacation. We had excursions going to England, Canada, the US in the hundreds. And they would go and come back. They're not going and stay, 1 or 2 nights. But the bulk of the people would go on a vacation with their family and come back. Why? Because they had disposable income. So these are some of the things that young people can do again. But I'm glad we were able to point out some of the comments. We'll go back to, I see Dave Bertrand say, them fellas are not going to make it possible for electoral reform. Why? They have too much money out of Dominica hidden in foreign banks. Dave, I agree, but my response to that is where your vote comes in. Because every 5 years, we have to either vote a government in or vote them out. And that is why your vote is so important, that you should not sell or have your vote compromised. But I agree with the comments that you make, Dave Bertrand. So let us just, we now just past that first hour, but we're going to, as we segue into the second hour, we're going to listen to a few lyrics of a song called Good Citizen. Now, that song was penned by the mighty Sparrow in 1967. That is what? 56 years ago. And you know, Calypso, as you know, Peter, a man of Calypso who loves Calypso as well as Tony. Calypso reflects what happened in your society.
Yep.
It's a way of giving the good, the bad, and the ugly. And
storytelling. Calypso is storytelling.
Exactly. And most times when we listen to a Calypso, we may be listening for a number of reasons. We like the melody and we didn't pay any attention to the lyrics. Or we like the beat. Or we like, you know, we that's what we listen to. It's jumpy and we dance to it. But we sort of miss the lyrics, the message that Calypsonian is singing about that affects our country. And the song Good Citizen, as I said, that was penned in 1967, speaks directly to what we're discussing here. And Sparrow started off by saying, when does someone really becomes a good citizen? I would like to know for sure. Why, when the ordinary man disagree with the establishment, they call it treason? Why should they persecute a brother for seeking black power? Don't they know a blind man could see that this is blatant hypocrisy? The real traitors and them are all in high society. Yet the government protecting all of them and penalizing you and me. And it goes on and on and on. He says, he goes on further in another stanza of the song. He says, they say you have the right to criticize, but then you are victimized. And without any reason, many times you find yourself politically paralyzed by that same good citizen, the person you voted for. Yet these fake and phonies enjoy long life of luxury, while they spread corruption throughout the country. When they should be arrested, they are protected and respected in the society. So we're going to listen to a few verses of that Good Citizen, and then once that's done, we'll come back into the second hour and continue the conversation. But I just thought
you said you wrote that song last year for last
No, in 1967.
In Dominica. No. But it sounds like that's a Calypso that could have been written for Carnival last year in Dominica.
I like that, Tony. I like that. You're sharp and a bright guy. Okay. But let's our producer is going to cue in that song for us. And I want all our folks on the live to listen to the words carefully. And like Tony asked, was that song written last year? And any meaning to it to us? So our producer, go ahead and let us listen to Good Citizen.
When does someone really become a good citizen? I'd like to know for sure. Why, when the ordinary man disagrees with the establishment, they call it treason? Why should they persecute a brother for seeking black power? Don't they know a blind man could see that this is blatant hypocrisy. The real traitors and them are all high in society. Yet the government protecting all of them and penalizing you and me. And in a million different ways they violate the law. It's the same good no good bastards who oppress the poor. They sell in black market, making excess profit, paying a starvation salary. These good citizens are the architects of economic slavery. They say you have the right to criticize, but then you are victimized, and without any reason. Many a time you find yourself politically paralyzed by that same good citizen. Yet these fakes and phonies enjoy a long life of luxury while they spread corruption throughout the country. When they should be arrested, they're protected and respected in the society. And in a million different ways, they violate the law. It's the same good no good bastards who oppress the poor. With a false declaration, tax evasion, defrauding customs duty. These good citizens are the architects of economic slavery. Lust and greed and fraud and strife, they specialize. Double deals, they idolize. If you're brave enough to open your mouth and criticize, one time you are ostracized and or victimized. Still they go unpunished and unaccused of any crime, while on the backs of the ordinary man these vultures climb. They use the riches and the power, make a mockery of the law and have the law protect them same time. In a million different ways they violate the law. It's the same good no good bastards who oppress the poor. They controlling bootlegging, dope peddling, prostitution and piracy. These good citizens are the architects of economic slavery.
All right. All right, so yeah, you had it, boy. Yeah, you had it. Good citizen. I mean, those words are so powerful and resonates with what we're experiencing today. And like I say, this social commentary speaks a lot. So we're going to move into the second hour of the program. It's amazing how quickly time flies by. But before I do that, let me just read through a comment there from our brother Bernard Allen. He says there, in light of your observation, Drago, the discussions locally and within the diaspora must emphasize why it is your vote already compromised by the determination of the Labour Party and its leadership to remain dishonest in their removal of that right to choose in relation to the electorate. Unless we recognize the intentions and the actions of this government to further this agenda, we'll be walking with our eyes closed, and we will never have free and fair election. But we'll continue to speak as if the process is fair and free. We must show the electorate that they have lost fairness under this incumbent, and that this incumbent is determined to further this agenda in order to protect their winning legacy. Those were comments there by one of our folks who were tuned in, Bernard Allen. Thank you, Bernard, for those comments. But Peter, you just heard the lyrics in that song. And as we segue into that second segment of the discussion, any thoughts on that?
Okay, let me just say, my thinking is that we have reduced our expectation of government, what government is supposed to be doing. Because of that, this government has capitalized on a system of what they call social programs. Social programs will bring no development in the country. Social program is resulted from the production of the country that is being used to help the less fortunate. But you can't build a country on social program. And basically, because of that, our people now fighting to see whether they could stay in good grace so that they can benefit from that social program. Take, for instance, if the government invested, let's say $1 million in planting coconut trees, then the people who want to work and sweat will plant coconut trees. 5 years later, they will have coconuts for sale. They can live off the coconuts. But the government will not put a program or investment in planting coconuts. What they'll do, they'll give you coconut cheese to eat. So everybody lined up to see who can get coconut cheese. In the end, the country haven't benefited anything. You understand? And that's the way we run our country. So that's why the votes, they can manipulate the voting system because people are looking at the government that want to facilitate production for everybody so the country can benefit. They look at a government that is distributing handouts so that if you're in good books, you'll get. If you're not in good books, you won't get. Now, my problem is that our politicians on both sides have accepted that form of government. So we'll say, oh, they're getting there and they're giving, or they have and we haven't got. That's not the problem. The deep problem is government is not doing what the country requires to push the country forward, to move it away from producing, let's say, $10,000 to producing $15,000, because that's the way you get development. As a country produces more, the economy gets bigger, the people benefit more, they create more opportunities, and you find rather than Dominicans have to go and study and can't find a way to go back to contribute, they have to contribute somewhere else because the country doesn't give them any opportunity. Look at the amount of jobs that is involved in the IT section. How many jobs that Dominica benefit from IT? Look at modern agriculture today. Look at the marine environment. I mean, I remember 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we built a marine hatchery. That's top of the line. What that does, if it was operating, we have a computerized system of catching fish from the ocean, hatching them, and replenish our shores. So when you hear about gokuli, when you hear kawang, you hear about lobster, kongs, all those things that we had that depleted over time with hurricanes and overfishing and all that, we could replenish. This is what other country does. They replenish their coastal areas, and by now we would have a lot of fish. Or we had a program to introduce crab farming. Crab farming is done all over the world. Can we get a system where we invest in a crab farming, train our people? So Dominica crab back, which is international, high price, we could have crab back not only for a week during independence, but we could be half crab every day, and we could have an export market for crabs. You know, so I mean, there's a lot of things we could do, but you have to take initiative, you have to make an investment, and if people are looking forward to be productive, rather than getting $300, I want to earn $4,000 a month. That is our goal.
So Peter, all what you've said here sounds beautiful and is absolutely the right direction that any serious thinking administration should go. But at the end of the day, we get back to where we are again and how the conversation started. That vote goes to an individual who doesn't have those aspirations that you just outlined. So it goes back again to how do we get our young people and our every citizen to say, well, in order for me to achieve and get what you just described, that I have to vote an honorable man like Anthony Drago into office, because I know if I put him there, I will get that. One of the persons on the chat again says, Fifth Sunshine, the people need to understand how important their votes are. Just the reason the DLP gives call out around election, they know your vote is powerful. Let me say one more thing before I get Tony to come in, and then I'll get back to you, Peter. So it goes back to that vote. What you're saying is right, but how do we translate that so that that person on the ground say, you know what, boy, I want to be independent. I don't want to be going on my knees begging a government. And therefore, come 2020, whatever it is, when they're coming up for election, I'm going to vote them out.
We have to live the aspiration. We have to help them know, help them agree or understand. Your father used to make $10. Libya make him make $1,000. You making $20 now. We have programs to make you 20,000. So they have to live the aspiration. But if they agree that we have to be fighting for what is sharing, they're not fighting for anything, so their vote have no value but to replace what is there.
Okay.
So that is a challenge.
Okay. All right. That's the challenge. I like where you ended. Tony, you want to chime in and make some comments on that, Tony?
Definitely, I want to chime in. I would say that someone cannot ride your back unless you bend over and allow them to jump on your back.
I like that.
And why do I go there? I go there because I am saying that we who recognize that the Labour Party government under the leadership of Roosevelt Skerrit is not interested in the development of Dominica. They're only interested in staying in power, staying in political power for the perks and the access to resources and everything and so on. So if we believe that they are not interested, then we on the other half have to be able to chart a way and a strategy to counteract that and to live the aspirations, to use the word that you use, to live the aspirations of the people so that they can understand what their vote means.
Yes.
All right. So that's why I started, because I want to say that Skerrit government is in power for 23 years is the responsibility equally of him and his machinations and the opposition who has failed to put together a winning strategy and to address the things that they identify. So for example, if we listen to the conversation that's been happening for the last 15 years or 10 years, if you want to go back that for 13 years, we are repeating the same thing, that the Labour Party wins the election, quote unquote, win the election by importing voters to vote, by spreading cool out close to the election. It's the same things over and over again. Can we point to one action, one strategy any of the opposition forces have put in place to counteract any one of those activities? So that responsibility has to be recognized and has to be taken up. And I think that I would like to believe that we have more control over what we can do and participate in, as we have than trying to convince people on the other side to come over to our side. We should be able to do everything that we have control over in the meantime that we're trying to convince other people. So what exactly are we doing as the people who are interested in seeing a change, who recognize how crucial it is for a change? What is it that we're doing concrete? So we're talking about voting, and we know that Dennis Byron just released a second phase of a report that he was engaged by Skerrit to put together on electoral reform, and he's proposing legislature and all of that. Now there are a number of forces in Dominica who are interested in seeing electoral reform, quote unquote electoral reform. But if I ask any 10 people, what is the position of these forces? What are their position? What are they saying is electoral reform? I will get maybe 10 different answers if I get any answer that is properly articulated. Again, because we cannot point to a document that says, let me send you a link to that document. Those are the problems we identify with the way the last few elections are run. And those are the things that we have to address. And these are what we can do. And this is what we suggest would be a good
strategy. Yeah.
Strategy. And so you can take that report from Dennis Byron. You can say, okay, we identified 10 items. Item 1, 2, and 3 is adequately addressed by his proposal. Item 4 and 5, he ignored. Item 5 and 6, what he proposes is completely opposite to what where is that document? So as we speak and we talk and we churn and we spin and we make chim and foam and mud and everything that we make, what do we have to show that we are doing that is concrete, that we can now say, okay, there are young people who don't know, they don't have a point of reference of our electoral system that is properly run. Let's do a workshop and invite 20 young people, and we have a document that we can base that workshop on. When those 20 young people leave there, they have a good idea of the historical perspective of when we used to have elections that were considered free and fair. We know what a free and fair election looks like, and we know what our aspirations are. Where are those documents that we can say, this is where the country was 50 years ago, this is where it got taken up to in 1990, this is where it got taken up to in 2000 when the Labour Party took over, and this is where it has regressed to in 2023. Until we take responsibility and act in a more responsible and professional manner as the folks who are seeking change, we are facilitating and we are allowing the incumbent government to remain in power because of our own incompetence and laziness, if you want to call it like that, or whatever the reason it is that we cannot sit down and put a document together in an age when everybody has a computer and everybody has a phone they can type a message on, and there are all the resources that everybody needs that can produce a 20-page or 25-page document that we can use and put next to what Dennis Byron is proposing to us and be able to dodge it in an objective manner. Until we recognize that just talking about it is insufficient, we're not going to make any progress.
Well, Tony, thanks for those comments. As I said, you're a guy who's candid, and that's what we're here for, to have that candid conversation. It's not just all about the niceties of the conversation. We have to have the real hard conversation, which I'm sure what you're pointing to. Because you're right. I mean, where we are now, as we said, and I'm sure some folks will agree to that, we are more in a reactionary mode, meaning that we're reacting to Byron's report. So Byron writes X, Y, and Z, and we're reacting to what he wrote, whether you agree or disagree with it. What I understand you to say, we should be more in a proactive mode. By now, we should have had a document which outlines, this is the people's report. This is what the people are saying they want. This is how the people saying they want to protect their vote and exercise their right under the Constitution to vote. And your vote is not going to be for sale, because the point which needs to be made too, the electoral reform is necessary. It's a necessary requirement in terms of the electoral process, but it's just one aspect. You can have the best of the electoral reforms that you have, and if there are not any regulations or enforcements and all the other thing that goes with it, which includes that vote, then it just becomes another exercise of a reform, and your vote is still being stolen. So I think you have raised some very pointing questions there, while we may not, and Civic Vibe never want to, just openly show your hands. It's like playing a domino game. You don't want to openly just throw all the strategy as to the how and the why, but at the same time, I think you have just given a broad overview of what you think the approach ought to be. I mean, I saw some folks, and I'm just going to say that a pass and move on, but I saw some folks went to the State House last week, Wednesday, and received the Byron's report from Skerrit. I mean, I'm still at a loss as to why that would have happened. We all know, and we all agree, several of us, that the way in which this engagement took place was not correct, was not right, was not morally correct. One might even say was not legally correct, the engagement of Byron. There is a complete silence of the role of the Electoral Commission as enshrined in the Constitution at section 38 38 of the Constitution. So you're not hearing nothing about the Electoral Commission having, gotten a report, having to engage into discussion with the people, nothing like that. So I think all that lends into what you're saying. So let me go back to Peter again.
Yeah,
Peter, you heard Tony. So what are your thought process?
Well,
Again,
I
bear in
totally
mind,
agree.
we're talking about our vote, our right to vote, and the sacredness of that vote to that our democracy.
I totally agree with Tony. I mean, when you look at our approach towards motivating our people, informing our people, we're just repeating something like we have for the last 15, 20 years. We have not really sit down and strategize and challenge our people. How in earth in 2020, when Dominicans have trained so many bright people that we have to depend on Byron to tell us how to fix our election system? I mean, that alone should be a no-go for the opposition. We have enough Dominicans at home and abroad that could sit down and, with all the reports that was written over the years, all the experienced election officers we have, past election officers, past civil servants, to sit down and put a proposal forward for our election. When we have to take $600,000 and give to a foreigner to tell us how to vote in Dominica, that alone should be a no acceptance by the opposition. That alone. The second thing, you cannot have two captains playing a game, and one captain is writing the rules, one captain is employing the umpire, one captain is umpiring the scorer, the linesman, everything to do with the game, one captain has it. And the other team when is sitting down on the roadside and coming and play the game. That is what we have in our elections. The law provides that the commission is the one responsible for conducting election. Even if in the back door, Mr. Skerritt and his Labour Party wanted to influence the commission, they can do it in the back door. But they're coming up in the front door and taking the lead in writing the rules and telling us how to fix our electoral system. How do we expect to participate and win? The man is putting everything he needs to make sure he sustains his winning habits. So I agree with Joe. We have to sit down as non-conformists of Labour Party, all the groups that came together, sit down and put forward their their decision as to what is required for a free and fair election. And I heard people say,
go ahead,
that, they want to reform so that Skerritt will lose. And it's not about winning and losing. It's about giving the people their power. That is our power. We want to know that it has meaning. It doesn't make sense for 50 people living in Wesley and 40 people coming from Antigua and determine who is going to sit as a parliament representative. They go back to Antigua and they have Brown giving them roads, Brown giving them schools, hospital. They don't have to depend on that person they put there for you. Personally, I'm Dominican, 100% Dominican. When I'm ready to live in Dominica, I will determine who I vote for. No, I'm not living in Dominica. I can be home for election. I will not vote because I do not want to impose anybody on the people who have to live in Dominica.
Alvin, before you go back, there's a comment here I think is very relevant. The response, I guess, to what I said. David Joseph says there is a document that was presented to the government of Dominica by the opposing forces, which outlined the wishes of the people. The Byron report must now be compared to that one produced by the group of clergy civic groups and law fraternity and the private sector. Are you familiar with that document? I'm just asking because I'm
well, I do know that there were several consultation and engagement taking place prior to the engagement of Byron. And yes, you had several groups meeting, CCM, the clergy, the unions, the bar. And I can't say for certain that there is a document entitled Electoral Reform that outlines the 5, 6, 7, or 8 areas. It may be. But what I do know that there were several.
But I mean, I don't want to interrupt you, but you see, just what you're saying there is in itself a support of what I'm saying. That
No, you're right.
Even if there's a document, if it's
then I should be able to
covered
go
under a
online.
bushel and just find it.
I should be able to go online and pull it up and say, you know, dot. And right now, I could pull it on my computer and say, hey, that exists, and that's what it is. And again, just to kind of piggyback on what Peter said and his comment, and Peter is so right. Guys, I refer you guys, and I read in detail section 33(2)A of the Constitution, which clearly says that every citizen and has that right to vote for a person to represent them in a constituency or representative. That's what it is about.
Yep.
So if you're not in that residence or domicile in that constituency, who gives you that right to vote for Tony? In that constituency, you're not resident or domicile there. So the section 33(2)A is quite clear. But let me also reference for purposes of our discussion and what Peter said earlier and Tony comments as well. Section 51 of the Constitution. Yeah, what it says, because earlier on I made reference of the Electoral Commission and the fact that folks went and received report from Civic. Every proposed bill and every proposed regulation or other instruments having the force of law relating to the registration of electors for the purpose of electing representatives or for the election of representatives and senators shall be referred to the Electoral Commission and the Chief Elections Officer at such time as shall give them sufficient opportunity to make comments thereon before the bill is introduced in the House and as the case may be, the regulation or other instruments are made. So clearly the Electoral Commission has a role. And my basic understanding is that report ought to have gone to them. They put their fingerprints on it. They call the Dominican people through the Chief Election Officer. Hey, we have this report. This report says X, Y, and Z. They arrange, because they got a structure in place. They have what you call them, registration officer, polling clerk, or if they need to engage new staff, this is what it is saying. The Electoral Commission wants to get your opinion. What do you think? Do you like it? Do you don't like it? And of course, once that document is finalized, it goes into the government, not the Labour Party. And I made that point. Skerrit must be able to differentiate his hat as Prime Minister, head of a government, and leader of the Dominica Labour Party.
Yes.
It's not a party political issue. So the document goes to the government. And the government, through the government machinery, will do what is necessary to ensure that the document is in a format that is presented to Parliament in a manner that becomes legislation. That is what they're for. You have the executive, you have the judiciary, and you have the legislature. This is what makes up a government. That's what makes up the structure. So it goes to the executive, who then will say, well, okay, this is the legal language it should have, whatever. And then it moves over to the legislature, where it's presented before the legislatures, and they look at it and they pass it yea or nay, and it becomes law. And if there's certain aspect of that legislation that is controversial or whatever, we have the judiciary, where we go before the judiciary and say, hey, section whatever is unconstitutional or whatever. That is the process. But Skerrit cannot be head of the Labour Party, as I think Peter rightly put it out. He's the captain of one side of the game, Labour Party, and then let's say the opposition party, in that case, the main opposition, the ELP. You're playing the game, he has the ball, and he determined the rules. So I think one of the way that would help us is, like, as Dave says earlier on, if there's such a document, let's fine-tune the document, let's present the document, and let that document be the document of the people. And further, we need to engage the commission. We need to find a way to hold their feet to the fire. And I know it's been said here so many times that we talk and we talk and we talk and we talk and we don't act. But yes, some of the talking is necessary, but we got to take some action. So I just thought I would make those comments. Lofty Durant, is your absence? Your team is doing a good job. Okay, in your absence, your team is doing
Thank you for that. Thank you.
I think earlier on, persons were asking about Brother Lofty. Brother Lofty is fine. He's doing well. Brother Lofty is just out of the country attending some graduation of one of his I believe it is his son, in somewhere in the Caribbean. So, but he's doing well. He's doing first class. He's well, and I'm just saying out to you, Brother Lofty, again, good afternoon, my brother. Have a good Sunday. We miss you, but like everything else, you need a little break, time out with the family. But Brother Lofty is doing fine. But that is the context again, which I want to put in. But you're right, Tony. The only document that's available now, that
people know about
electoral reform is Byron's report. Nothing else.
So Alvin,
and we're not even sure, without tripping you, we're not even sure whether the commission has its fingerprints on that, because they haven't said anything to us, neither through the chairman or the chief elections or anybody.
Right. So I was going to talk about that a little, because again, David Joseph is saying that Randy Rodney was part of the group who wrote the proposal to the government of Dominica. Therefore, it was prudent for him to be part to obtain the copy of Byron report in order to compare the two. So I don't think we're saying that he should not receive it. I think a major point that is being missed there is that we should not be receiving anything from Skerrit. Or anything that deals with that should be coming from the commission. That is the role of the Electoral Commission. So, Brother Joseph, I hope you understand that we're saying is that we have to be able to recognize and not play the game that is being put in front of us with bent rules. First of all, the Electoral Commission should have been who hired Byron, if anybody was going to hire Byron. Byron was supposed to be reporting to them. They should be the ones who should be receiving the report and giving it back to the people. But again, what I would say is that I would like to see, let's spend time on deciding what it is that we can do, Alvin. So in Dominica, there's a vacuum of good media, if I may say so. All right. We have Dominica News Online that seems to say, well, there was an accident in Pocasset and 2 people died, and they leave it at that. Or the Prime Minister said X, Y, and Z, and there is no attempt to give any kind of context or background or anything in depth or detail, as we would expect from, let's say, what Dominica News Online has become one of the leading source of news. Now, the forces who are advocating for electoral reform, free and fair election, those of us who are advocating for change, what do we have to show for 20 years of effort? And let me put my question in context, okay? Hurricane Maria came by. A young lady from the north took her camera, her phone, and she went around Dominica interviewing people, getting the experience about what Maria did to them, and showing a perspective of how devastated Castlebrus was, or Budo was, or whatever. 5 years later, she's the most popular source of information about Dominica. And of course, I'm talking about MO News.
Yes.
So there is a demonstration that without a lot of resources, without whatever it is, if we think about this thing properly and come up with a proper plan, there has to be a way to be able to get the information that we need in front of sufficient people so that they can be properly educated and they can have the information they need to respond and to be passionate and to take action. Because let us face it, there's no dictator that just decide, you know what, I fed up with that, you know, man. Let me just give them people back their country and go about my business. That has never happened. It is always in the context of people, sufficient people. It doesn't take everybody. Sufficient people, and in a consistent manner, and with good leadership, coming and putting pressure to where it becomes unbearable, and that person leaves office, or that person is forced to resign, or that person is forced to give concessions to what is being demanded. Just talking at them, they never are going to decide that, you know, let me give concessions and okay, guys, all right, I hear what you're saying, let's do this. No, they're always going to manipulate the system so that they always have the advantage. So the strategy has to be to engage the people, because you're doing it on behalf of the people. Engage the people, give them the information that they need, do it properly. Again, I refer to Able News to demonstrate how it's done.
Yeah.
With nothing.
No, yeah. Well, no, I like that example that you gave. And I'm reading the chat as you are going along, and I'm seeing a lot of, you know, comments coming through, and some are being directed directly to certain individuals. And let me say, for the purposes of Civic Vibes and our program, the intention here is not to malign any one particular person that may have attended this conversation or this meeting with Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit. I think we're looking at that in this much broader picture in terms of the process. And most times we confuse the two. We personalize some of those things, and that's not the intention. So I would hope that, some of the comments coming across would recognize that. Let me just say and put again into some context. The individual who happens to be the Prime Minister of Dominica is an individual who made it publicly and said publicly, no law, no constitution will prevent him from doing what he has to do. That was a statement made by him. He tried to clarify what he meant or how in what context it was said, but that's what we're dealing with. And we saw, without necessarily, I don't want to divert from where our conversation is, but we see an issue as it relates to a gift that he received and the role of the IPO and his response to that gift. So that clearly tells you that's an individual that don't regard law or constitution. Then this is his approach. This is how he behaved. And Tony made the point. Which tyrant that gives up power, or which dictator that gives up power, that doesn't want to see a processing a good democracy? Which one that does that? But I see Peter wanted to come in, so let's allow Peter to come in, and then.
First thing I would say, there was a broad coalition of civic organization that came together and put a proposal forward earlier o'clock. I think if the Prime Minister wants to compare what he has from Byron, the coalition should be represented. No, shouldn't be individual, but it's a coalition. Because it's critical that we show cooperation in dealing with that matter. Because I said that's not a party issue. That is a national issue where each and every one of us want to see a better voting system. Because we know the end. The end result is, after, when people are fed up, you're going to have uprising, people will die, and you have deterioration of our country. See what happened to Haiti? And many other countries in Africa, they allow their elections to go unsupervised without being fair. After a while, it ends up in confusion. So if Dominicans want to have a stable country, a country of fairness, is we to come forward and ensure that when somebody is elected, they are elected because the people want them. They do not have the opportunity to impose themselves on the people.
Thank you for those comments. Thank you for those comments, Peter. I think what you just said too, as it relates to the upheaval that can likely unfold, was clearly articulated in the CCJ's report. I don't recall the exact section now, but they made that point that if your democracy and your election is compromised, that in itself can lead to revolt, unrest in a country. So you're absolutely correct. But again, going back to there are quite a few comments being made on the chat. I don't think we're coming down to the end of the second hour. We may not have time to go through all of them. But just if I get the general theme coming across, is one whereby they're saying that, well, the way in which Byron was engaged was wrong in the first place, and we the people did nothing about it. And therefore, since he was engaged by Skerrit, he had to go back to Skerrit. And so I guess we are, how they say, it's water under the bridge, or we're quarterbacking. But while that may be true, there is still, the people can still make certain demands in terms of whatever is presented and try to get, as I said earlier, the role of the commission in all of that. So we won't go through each and every one of the comments, but let me just, I think, Tony, you had something you wanted to share as it relates to the discussion. Do you still want to do that? Because I can get our producer to do it, or do you want
No,
to?
we're very close to the end.
Okay, okay.
I
So-
think we can pass on that.
Okay, all right, excellent. So let me just say, it is my understanding, and I think Peter sort of alluded to it, that there is what is called an electoral reform coalition. I think that's what it's called, ERC.
Right.
And it's made up of various civic organizations as well as political parties. As I understand it, the two opposition political parties, obviously you won't get the Labour Party in there, but I'm sure they will be welcome a seat at the table. But the two opposition Labour parties, being the United Workers' Party and the Dominica Freedom Party, are members. I also understand there's certain trade union groups represented there, CCM or NJAM and various other interest groups. They call themselves the ERC. It is my hope that could be the vehicle or the forum through which some of the observation that Tony raised in terms of having a document, and what David Joseph said, that there is a document that it is existing somewhere, that we can have that document as form part of our narrative, our messaging moving forward, even if we may have to deal and use it side by side with the Byron report. But clearly we can't just depend on that sole Byron report and be in what one might say a reactionary mode, just merely reacting to what's in there. I'm going to, Tony, I'm going to take you to make a comment, and I'm going to come back to Peter, and then hopefully we can begin to wind down and give our sort of closing comments, summarize based on what we've said so far, and what some of the comments coming through on the chat. But I will say though that the engagement there is quite stimulating. I mean, there is a lot, right, Tony? You agree to that?
I agree with that completely.
There are tons of comments coming through. I've never seen it so engaging, man. The comments are coming wild and furious. The last comment concerned, we have to stop that document from menace Byron from making it to Parliament. Viva Mamo, yeah, you were saying, go ahead with Viva Mamo. He has a long
let's get
it
straight. Let's get it straight, guys. The PM appointed his consultant. He has a right to do so under law. He can distribute his report and initiate consultation on the draft laws. There is nothing wrong, unlawful, unconstitutional about this, even though it would have been best if the Electoral Commission has initiated the process. Once the Prime Minister asked the Commission to comment on the draft bill, this is the constitutional role of the commission. When it is considering the draft bill, it may undertake its own consultant as prudent and good governance would require.
Let me.
You want to comment on that directly?
Yeah, briefly, just very briefly. I wouldn't say much. And I'm sure Peter might want. At the end of the day, I think what we all need to understand is that whatever document, whether it's one done by the ERC or whatever, or Byron, it has to reflect the will of the people.
Yep.
Whatever document has to reflect the will of the people. Let's go back again to where we started off that conversation today. That vote is yours. That power is yours. And no one should take that away from you. So it could be Byron's report. It could be Skerrit Constitutional Authority report. It could be ERC report. It must reflect the will of the people.
Yep.
That document referred to as the Constitution, which I will go by again. That Constitution, it starts off by saying, whereas we the people of Dominica. That's our Bible. We the people. And if we the people want this, that's what we'll get. If we the people don't want this, we won't get this. So I just want to make that point in this general sense, without necessarily directing, because we can find ourselves here discussing what is right, what is wrong, what is this. At the end of the day, it has to reflect the will of the people, and it has to have a certain level of concurrence with our Constitution of Dominica. So I'll let you jump in, then I'll have Peter come in. We have another 8 minutes before we wind down. So come in to
quick.
Brief, and then Peter.
Yeah, so I want to respond just 5 seconds to this comment by Viva Mahmoud that Skerrit was within his purview to hire a consultant and whatever. What I'm saying is, and what I want to focus my contribution here today is that we have to focus on what we should be doing or what we can do. So that if we have a strong position, a strong push, then Skerrit can hire 100 consultants. And at the end of the day, he's going to know that it's not going to be accepted by the people. And if we are doing it on behalf of the people, this is the point I want to make. If what we are doing is on behalf of the people, we have to engage the people. David Joseph said that the report was presented to Skerrit, and because it wasn't in his favor, he shelved it. Who is Skerrit to shelve a report? Why you can present it to him, but it's more important to present it to the people. If you prepare a document on behalf of the people to represent the people, these are the people you have to pay attention to and to show them what the points that you're making and stay engaged with them and make sure that they become intimately familiar with every aspect that you are saying that they should be. Give them the education, motivate them, and form a strategy. There was a meeting that was called, and everybody's asking what next. And I would hope that meeting was part of a broader strategy. Not we'll just call a meeting and see what the result is. And then we go back and then we say, what can we do next week? What can we do next month? We have, my appeal is to the forces who are seeking change, whether it's in electoral reform or in government or whatever it is let us get our act together. Let us get organized. Let us put a well-articulated strategy together, and let us use technology. Let us use good practices to show how professional we can be. We should demonstrate what we can do if one day we get the reins of governance of the country.
All right, Peter, jump in, Peter.
Well, I can say, if there is zero chance of winning an election, there is no need for political parties. So your party can do whatever it wants. If the system is organized in a way that you can have zero chance of winning, there is no need in working on party. Now it's time for every Dominican, inside and outside party, to come forward and ensure that we have a voting system that reflects the power of the people. So that's why I say no, there is no need for political activities. Whatever energy you have, whatever resources you have, you put it to the group, the ARC, and let the ARC educate and prepare Dominicans to have a voting system that gives them their power in their hands so that they can change their parliamentary, not government, their parliament representative when they fail to perform for the people.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother Peter, for that. Somebody commented there that exactly, Mr. Carbon, you're 109% correct. So they give you 9% above 100. Not often you get that kind of score.
Not 110, not 105.
Peter, you got 109, you know, they give you. Oh, boy, that's great. Then Dave Bertrand also said the report doesn't mention anything about the tints issued by the CCJ. And again, that's even another issue which we can raise, and there is room for conversation on that, because those of us who were privy to that report and saw it, and it was a report that's available, like Tony said earlier, it's online. You can go there right now and Google it and you'll get it. It points out the number of anomalies that were in the 2019 elections. And even, as I've said previously on previous program, even the sitting judge, Glasgow, who presided, well, I won't say he presided, but he sort of went through the petitions. He didn't allow a hearing, admitted that section 17 of the laws that deals with electors list was violated, appeared to have been violated. So clearly, that tells us that there's something wrong with the process. But again, it boils back to the will of the people to do what needs to be done. But we're coming quickly to the end of the program. I see it's 7:58, so it's amazing how quickly time flies by. I just want to say to all of those on the chat who have given their comments, thanks for those comments. We were not able to go through every one of them, but clearly from what I'm seeing and what Tony is saying, there is a lot of engagement. And what I think needs to happen is that engagement needs to go beyond the walls of where we are now, the Facebook, the YouTube, the Civic Vibes, and take the message across. We have to be like evangelists. Go forth and evangelize the message that needs to be evangelized to the people, if I may put it that way. So I'm going to have Peter to give us your closing comments as we wind up, and then I will have Drygo, and then I will come in, and then we will end with another calypso, and this is one by Karen Ash. She's a calypsonian from Trinidad and Tobago, and she penned a song called The Voter's Prayer, another powerful song. It's in 2020. And the lyrics in that song is just as powerful as what we heard earlier from Good Citizen. So we will wind up with that, but let's get Peter to just wind up quickly your closing, and then I'll go over to Tony.
Yeah, as I said before, Dominica is a country that we are tied to. We can fight, we can run as far as we want. That is our birth, that is our commitment. Dominica is our home. Outside and inside, we are home, and we want to see a stable, progressive country that creates opportunities for its citizens, where standard of living is continuously on the improvement. And the way our country is being run is really reflecting the manipulation of the electoral system. Because every politician knows that the only thing that can stop them is the vote. And if they know they have control of the vote, they can do whatever they want with the people. Thank you and good night.
Thank you for those closing comments, Peter. Tony, you want to give your closing comment?
Sure. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to participate in this discussion. I remember Peter as Minister of Agriculture in Dominica, and someone I had great respect for. I still have a lot of respect for him, and I feel very honored to be sharing a platform with him. Also, Alvin, of course, everybody knows your background, your pedigree, if you call it that, but also your accomplishments, and all the different areas that you function with very stellar results. And so, again, I am humbled to be part of a discussion with you two very distinguished gentlemen. For that, I am thankful. My contribution today, I hope, was clear. I wanted to say that if you're pointing your finger at somebody, 3 of them are pointing back at you. And so if we look at where we are and we don't like the progress or the results that we've been getting, we need to look at what we can do differently. And I am suggesting that there is a lot that we can do differently. The technology is there, the platform is there. If we can clearly recognize that what we're doing is for the people, let us engage the people and and they're willing, they show that they're willing, they come out in numbers when they're called. Let's just do it in a more structured and strategic way so that we can see more results and more progress. You spoke about young people. Again, we're doing it for the folks. The young people are a very important faction of the people. In other words, what we're talking about is their inheritance. The inheritance of Dominica, which has been referred to as a gem, the inheritance in terms of their identity as a Dominican. Let us find a way to engage them, and let us find a way to educate them on what has happened before now. And so as we go forward, we can really bring them along, because if they have the information, I am sure they're going to make certain choices that will help further the cause. And so, to all the audience who interacted and responded, thank you so much for participating. And Alvin, pay my regards to Lofty, and tell him that I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And
all
to
right,
all of the viewers and listeners as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tony. Let me, on behalf of Civic Vibes, just thank Brother Carbon for engaging with us again yet another Sunday on the program. Like you, I have had the opportunity to interact with Brother Carbon during my tenure as a senior civil servant, public officer in the public service. And I always mention the fact that I have the fortunate advantage, if one might put it this way, to have worked under several administrations, starting with LeBlanc, Patrick John in the LeBlanc-Patrick John administration in the 75, and moving on to the Freedom Party in the 80s, and also the United Workers' Party in 95 when they came into office. So I was able to see 3 different administrations perform as a public officer. And so that gives me a certain advantage to make contrast as to what we have now and what obtained before. So I appreciate that. I want to thank Peter immensely. I know Peter's heart is in Dominica. He's physically in the US, but I know his heart, and he wants to see well for Dominica. So thank you, Peter. Thank you. I also want to thank you, Tony, for taking time off and co-host this program with me. You are someone that I have also very high regard for, very analytical in your thought process, and don't mince word. And it's like having kids. If you always tell your kids all what they do is correct and they're right and they're good, they will never learn. There comes a time when you have to have that hard talk with your kids and say, look, what you're doing is not correct. This is the road you should take. And I think this is what you're doing by your comments, is having that hard talk with us as to how we can be better. And like you, I know, although you are in the diaspora as well, your heart is in Dominica. You've had extensive experience working in Dominica, the WASCO, DCP, you name it. And we all mean well for Dominica. So on behalf of Civic Vibes, I want to thank you as well. I want to say again to our brother Lofty and all the rest of the Civic Vibes crew, our production team that makes sure that works behind the scene to make this happen. Joan and all the other folks, thank you very much. And of course, our many, many, many fans. I mean, I couldn't keep up with the comments. I believe, and I'll talk to our producer as well, I believe there is a way we may be able to capture some of those comments. So that's something we want to do, because that too could help us as we move forward. A lot of the comments there makes a lot of sense, good contributions. I want to thank you all, the viewers. If you missed the program, you can always go back on YouTube and go back on our Civic Vibe Facebook page and listen to it, because they're there in podcast form. And I advise that you share that. Let's not keep that information. It's like the Bible says, those who are given talents and hid the talents. If you have a certain talent, you got to go out and share it. So let's share that information. Let's engage and have that dialogue, because we're at a very critical juncture for our history in Dominica. We'll soon be celebrating 50 years as a nation, as a young nation. That's right around the corner. And the work has to begin now so that we can put our electoral process in a manner that come 50 years, which is just around the corner, we can boast and stand up with our head high and say, here we are as an independent nation, a democracy, we have done the right thing, and we're now able to celebrate 50 years as an independent nation. So I want to thank you, all the viewers who have been on. And we just want to end now. And I just want to indulge the producer. As I said, we're going to end with a calypso by Calypso Karen Ash out of Trinidad and Tobago. And the calypso is titled The Voter's Prayer. And again, to say, your vote is your voice. Your vote is your power. Do not let anyone steal your vote. And until we do that again next week, Sunday, good evening. And producer, go ahead and take it away. Let's have that calypso by Karen Ash, The Voter's Prayer. Thank you, listeners.
Hatred and crime, where man's heart is hard like stone, where avarice and greed exceed human need, Lord, I approach your throne, where hypocrites talk and predators walk, and bigotry now abound, where anything goes with wolf in sheep clothes, and honest man can't be found. In the midst of this madness, when everything fails, Lord, save us from the blindness. From my eyes, remove the scales. Help me discern the road from the righteous, honest men from the thief, those blessed with a vision from those who cause my country grief. The morally bankrupt, save us from the corrupt. Time for my country to rise. This is my voter's prayer. We lean on your guidance. Yeah, my voter's prayer. We need men of experience. This is my voter's prayer. My most humble supplication. Hear my voter's prayer. Shower your blessings on our nation. Oh yeah. I see phonies and fakes, vipers and snakes, whose hands always in the till, who pilfer and steal with a shoplifter's seal, and Lord, look the thief and still, who promised the world, but if truth be told, put honesty on the shelf. For without any shame, their one goal and aim is to help and to serve themselves. Be the doctor or lawyer, their greed pure. For just like a liver, they so twist, they always want more. Help me descend the road from the righteous, build up from the deep, be trustworthy and conscious from those who will cause us grief. Oh yeah, the morally bankrupt.
All right, folks,
In them
let's
all
see
truth
what
dies
the
like
protest
flies
prayer
Save
came
us.
from the Korean Ash, as she said it. The lyrics, as I said, powerful. And so good evening, and till next week when we will have another engaging program. Good evening, everyone.